Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at one of the more interesting Windows 8 tablets on the market. This is the Sony VAIO Duo 11. 11.6 inches full HD, that means 1920 by 1080 pixels, and an 11.6 inch display, really sharp, less than 3 pounds, quite thin, but what's interesting about it is a slider. So you pick it up over here. See how easy that was? Did you see reviews where people said that was hard? It wasn't hard, was it? Anyway, you pop it back, locks into place, and then you've got a keyboard built in too. Backlit keyboard, a little optical trackpad sensor that you really don't need it because this has a touch screen, and we're going to look at it now. So at the launch of Windows 8, there have been a few really interesting convertible tablets available and transformer tablets available, or at least announced. Some of them are not yet available. The Asus Tai-Chi, for example, that has 2 displays, not one. And we've seen the transformer style. There's the Asus RT transformer. There's going to be Intel-based versions of that, and the Samsung Active, which is another transformer. That means you can get an optional keyboard dock, plop them together. And then there are a few that are just pure tablets too. If you don't want the keyboard dock, you can just have a tablet. And among sliders, we have the Sony VAIO Duo 11 here and the Toshiba Satellite U925, which is priced actually about the same as this guy, but surprisingly, you get a little more value for your money, I would say, with the Sony. But first off, as I showed you, you can use this as a straight tablet. 11.6 inch, full HD, 1920 by 1080 IPS display. Really, really nice, sharp display. Not just that. The colors are beautiful. You know, when Sony does a high-end display, they do a nice job with it. 10 points of capacitive multi-touch on here and an active digitizer. It's an N-Trig digitizer. For those of you who use these things, you know Wacom and N-Trig make the 2 most common digitizers you're going to find there to use with active digital pens. And it's a 400 nit brightness display, so it's quite bright. Has an ambient light sensor, which you can disable if you want to, and it also has a backlit keyboard in there. You can have it either be on all the time, or you can use the ambient light sensor to control it. Now, as a tablet that you're going to hold as a slate, it's a little bit bigger than your average 11.6 inch tablet because it's got some of the framework and ports on here that you won't find on other of those tablets, and because there's a keyboard slider. It weighs 2.87 pounds, so it's not super duper light. If you're looking for something you're going to carry on your arm like an Android tablet or an iPad, this kind of product is not it. This is really for folks who want the full Intel Core ULV CPU experience in here, a lot of ports, a real computer with the keyboard built in, and don't mind actually having to prop this up on your knee, say if you're sketching or drawing, which is actually one of the more comfortable ways to do it. Put it on the desk. She has little feet on the back that you can prop up, so it tilts it a little bit for comfortable use. But like I said, not super duper light, lighter than some competing products like the Lenovo IdeaPad Yoga, which is 13.3 inches and 3.4 pounds. In terms of thickness, it's actually fairly thin, as you can see here. Also very nicely made. Aluminum, Gorilla Glass, by the way, on the front here. And you can see those viewing angles. See how it maintains viewability, other than, of course, reflecting a little bit because it's glossy. But fairly thin. Sony's usual nice attention to detail and design. Lots of metal in the casing. Soft touch finish on the back. So it feels good. Doesn't want to slip out of your hand like some plasticky back tablets. Better for keeping a grip on it. Stays remarkably cool and runs very quiet, which is nice. There's some exhaust fan holes all along here, and intake holes, and there's actually one underneath the display too, so when you pop up the display it gets a little bit more ventilation going, but this is actually quieter than my Samsung Series 7 slate, which was last year's poster child for Windows 8 development and running on a Core i5 2nd gen, so pretty impressive then. But as we look at the back here, you can see there's a little rubber door here, and you can take that off because Sony likes sheet batteries, and there's an optional sheet battery for this that doubles run times. That costs $149, and that gives you a place to stick the digital pen that comes with this. There is no silo built into this, unfortunately. Not enough room because they tried to make it really thin. We have ports going on everywhere, so that's why it isn't there, annoying as it is. You have little latch holes, that's where the battery gets into. This tells you right back here that you have NFC. There's also a rotation lock over here, and it's pointing you in the right direction. These are little feet that pop up to give you a little bit of extra elevation, or if you want to change your angle when it's deployed in keyboard mode. On this edge right here, we have our power adapter. It comes with a compact charger, standard notebook style. And here's our gigabit Ethernet. Nice to see that. Often you don't get Ethernet at all on Ultrabooks or tablets, let alone gigabit Ethernet. On this side here we have a VGA port. Okay, don't start laughing. Business people need the legacy VGA port for things like projectors. That's why it's there. And some folks still have older monitors that use VGA. And that can put out at a maximum of 1920 by 1200, just like the HDMI port on this. Full-size SD card slot also does memory stick duo cards. Here's your audio jack, 3.5mm combined headphone and microphone jack. On the bottom here, along the lower edge, now with a lot of these tablet design products, you're going to see buttons get moved to the edge so you can actually access some of the important buttons without actually having to pop open the computer. So here we have the VAIO Assist button that gets you into tools to do recovery, tune up your machine. We have volume control buttons right there, and that's our rotation lock button. Stereo speakers is one of your grills right here. It has Dolby Mobile audio. You can switch between that and X Loud. Surprisingly, the speakers on this are pretty loud. They're actually louder than my Sony VAIO P13.3 notebook, which, well, it shouldn't be, but it is. And by the way, Sony's X Loud is actually a little louder, I think, and fuller than the Dolby Mobile. You can switch between those audio drivers to suit you. Here we have our indicator LEDs for power, hyperactivity, charging, and whether the wireless is on or off. Two USB 3.0 ports. One is sleep and charge, full-size HDMI port, and there's your power button. So very well equipped by Ultrabook standards or tablet standards. You got all the ports that you really need to do pretty much everything with this. Now to open it up, if you buy one of these, there's a little instruction sheet right at the top that tells you how to do it, and as I showed you, it's actually quite easy. There's a little ridge over here, you can see that, and that's where you grab it by and you just pull it up. It's not hard at all. It's got a little stiffness to it, which is something that we want. Interesting kind of steampunk back here. Sony is taking some chances with style. However, this is more appealing than the Toshiba Satellite convertible slider tablet that we mentioned, which really just has everything is exposed. They don't even put a little vanity cover on here. So we've got this hiding some of the internals of the slider. Locks down pretty firmly. Once you deploy it, you can kind of push it back and it goes into place, and there's little feet there that stop it from sliding any further. So it's fairly stable. If you do want to poke and draw it, it doesn't wobble all over the place. Actually better than a standard notebook hinge in that respect, because often those, if you're trying to draw or touch, you'll see, it starts wobbling on you. So there's the back here, and it's protecting some fairly delicate looking internals in here. So you can see if you reach in here, if you have children, keep them away from this. Here's ribbon cable. There's one on the other side if you reach all in there. And these are the hinge mechanisms. Now none of this feels flimsy, it all feels strong. You can see the metal springs in here actually, and they are pretty darn strong looking. But again, there's exposed stuff in here, so you don't let this near the beach, you don't let this near adventurous children or mischievous cats. And now to look at some competitors. Here's the Lenovo IdeaPad Yoga, another really nice and fairly unique Windows 8 tablet / convertible notebook Ultrabook. This is 13.3 inch, so you can see it's going to be bigger. In terms of portability, obviously the Sony is more portable. Depends on whether a larger screen is something you want and a larger keyboard versus the portability. The Yoga weighs 3.4 pounds versus 2.87 pounds for the VAIO. What you do get is a full keyboard. Since this uses an interesting 360-degree hinge over here, there's no slider mechanism that's going to take up some of your keyboard real estate, so you get the full-size trackpad and keyboard. So for those of you who are really looking to do a lot of writing, obviously the keyboard is going to be important to you. You just think touch would be fun to have, that kind of thing. Then the Yoga is going to appeal to you more. One thing the Yoga does not have is the active digitizer. It has a touchscreen, but it doesn't have a digital pen or a digitizer that can work with a digital pen. You can use your finger or a capacitive stylus, not very precise, not something that artists or copious note takers are going to want to use them. And the Yoga, of course, looks like a normal laptop, but it does interesting things like this. So you can just flatten it right down, you can use it like that, you can use it like a tablet. One advantage here is obviously you can tilt this to any angle that suits you, whereas this guy is locked at this angle. You can use the feet to change it a little bit. That said, I find that this angle really works for me. Pretty much any place I've used it, on my lap, on a table. Definitely, Sony, I would say, researched just exactly the right angle to make this about as usable as it could be. Since it's an IPS display, viewing angles aren't too much of an issue, so you don't have to worry about wobbling it back and forth to get good viewing angles. Likewise, the Yoga has an IPS panel, 1600 by 900 versus 1920 by 1080 over here, but I'd say that this is a pretty nice display. I'm not feeling like I'm slumming here by using it. So really, it's just a matter of which design is more useful to you and what size machine you're looking for. One thing I will say about the Yoga, and I'm still kind of partial to the center swivel design that we used to see on older tablet PCs and on the ThinkPad Twist tablet, is that when you fold this shut, look where your keyboard is. Oh my. So it turns off the trackpad and it turns off the keyboard when you've got it folded flat, but nonetheless, it's a little disconcerting to be dragging this across the table or on your lap and grabbing it by the keys. Keyboard's well made, but you just got to worry a little bit about that. And here we have the 11.6-inch Samsung Series 7 slate. Again, this came out last year and it was used as a development platform for Windows 8, but graphic artists bought it up like crazy too, because this has a Wacom digitizer. 11.6 inches, just 1366 by 768, and the Samsung Active, which is this year's Windows 8 model, is the same resolution. So you're looking at a lower resolution product there, but in terms of size, even though they're both nominally 11.6-inch products, now we have them on top of each other, so you can see the difference in footprint, and the Samsung is a little bit smaller in footprint than the Sony is. And again, this is about the same size as the Samsung Active Pro that has a Core i5 CPU in it. And this guy weighs about 2 pounds, as does the Active. So how about pricing? Sony products are expensive, right? Well, you know, not so much. They've actually gotten a clue, and I will say that you get what you pay for now. So this guy starts at $1099. That's with a Core i3 and 4 gigs of RAM and a 128 gig SSD, and Sony has fast SSDs. I don't really recommend Core i3 ULV CPUs. ULV is an ultra low voltage CPU that's used in Ultrabooks. Not as capable as the i5 and i7. If you want to get the i5 with 128 gig SSD and 6 gigs of RAM, then you're looking at $1199, and you can go up to a Core i7 with a 256 gig SSD for $1499, and then there are increments in between. You want the Core i7, but you don't want the bigger SSD drive, or vice versa, so you can configure it in between ways if you want on Sony's website. But if you pick them up in store, you'll probably find either the Core i7 with the 128 gig SSD and 6 gigs of RAM for $1199, or the Core i7 with 256 gig for $1499. So pretty similar to a lot of Ultrabook pricing, also similar to the Core i5 option, again on the satellite that we mentioned with the convertible slider. But with this guy, you get the dual digitizer, you get more RAM. Speaking of RAM, this has 4 gigs soldered on the motherboard, and there's one SO-DIMM slot open, DDR3 RAM, 1333 megahertz. I have not taken this apart yet, but I know that other folks have, and you can actually access that memory slot. Max RAM is supposed to be 8 gigs on this. Battery is sealed inside, again typical of Ultrabooks and tablets. If you want to disassemble it and find that battery, you can. We're going to take it apart, so look at our written full review when it's available to see what we found when we cracked this baby open. The Core i5 option is the usual Core i5 3317U running at 1.7 gigahertz, and the i7 is the 1.9 gigahertz option with this machine. Fast, benchmarks very well. Sony tends to optimize for speed pretty well, sometimes at the expense of battery life. This has a 4950 milliamp battery inside, which is a decent capacity, not huge. And at maximum, I'd say 5 hours is what I get out of this, running it at about 40% brightness, which is pretty bright because this is a 400 nit display. And speaking of performance, it scores a very impressive 4772 on PC Mark 7, putting it at right at the top of Core i7 Ultrabook type machines, and certainly tablets. So, full Windows 8, full Core i5 and i7 options, or i3 if you want to. That means you get Windows Desktop and the ability to install regular Windows 7 applications that you're used to. So you can see we've got Adobe Reader on here, I've got Corel Painter 12 installed, I've got Evernote. All your favorite Windows 7 apps are here. You can even put games on here. It has Intel HD 4000 graphics, integrated graphics, again pretty much standard for tablets and Ultrabooks. Capable enough to play Left 4 Dead 2, older 3D games. You're not going to be playing lots of Crysis 2 on a machine with Intel HD 4000 graphics, especially not at full 1080p resolution, but it's certainly adequate to play games. And while we're here looking at the desktop, we're going to talk about this lovely digital pen right here. It comes with the digital pen, does not come with a place to stick the digital pen. If you buy that optional battery sheet, there's a place to stick the pen. Also, they have a nice little $50 leather and carry case that has a little holder for the pen too, which is, for me, surprising, because usually Sony charges like $100 for a nice leather case, so that's not too bad. But anyway, pen right here, this is the back end of it, not the kind that you're going to want to use as a virtual eraser, because it's not really designed for that. It's not smooth and soft, more like you could put a string through here. It's got a little hole, so if you want to, well, tie it to your belt so you don't lose it, I guess. 2 buttons, so you can assign one button to be the eraser by default. The one closer to the pen tip is the one that's used as a right-click function. And we've got a little cap here also. You can put a string through that too, that in there. Tight fitting cap. Comes with 2 nibs. This is the default nib that's on there. Nice looking piece of aluminum hardware here, by the way, and a pretty good size to hold. Not too heavy, but not too light. Contrasting kind of coppery brown, bronzy color going on over here. So we have pressure sensitivity here thanks to the N-Trig digitizer that's used on the product. And it does things like hover, so we can hover on the screen and see if I get my hand out of the way so you can see the little dot moving across the screen. So it knows when you're close to the screen with the pen, and it automatically disables the touch screen, so you don't have to worry about things like vectoring if you're resting your hand on the screen to take notes or to draw or digitally paint. Not a problem. And that works pretty reliably. I tried several different programs and it did that just fine, palm rejection. So why do you want one of these? You're one of those people that loves to mark up PDFs, you need to do digital signatures, you take notes, you use vertical market applications that support handwriting recognition, or you're a graphic artist. Now, graphic artists, folks, you know that Wacom and N-Trig, they have their pluses and their minuses. A lot of people are a little bit more pro Wacom. And I'll say that N-Trig has done a pretty good job here with this in terms of responsiveness and speed. I know that I've seen 1 or 2 videos of this not tracking very quickly. I have not seen this do any more poorly, shall I say, than the Samsung tablet with the Wacom digitizer in terms of tracking fairly quick movements. Now, when I draw, I don't go so fast. I kind of do it at normal speed, but I'll show you spinning some circles with this. It does a reasonably good job of tracking. It also has that full Core i5 in here. The one thing about Atom tablets is that Atom has certainly improved over the years, but it's still not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and it has a little bit harder time keeping up with tracking the stylus and doing computational tasks in general. So for more serious graphic artists, I would say it's going to cost you about $200 more to go up to a Core i5 machine from an Atom machine. Go ahead and do that. One thing about the N-Trig digitizer, there is no WinTab driver. Again, graphic artists, you know what that means. That's the pressure sensitivity plugin that programs like Adobe Photoshop rely on. Now we're going to contact N-Trig to see if they're going to have anything available for folks to download to remedy that situation with Photoshop. But it does come with ArtRage Pro, and we've tested it with a couple of other applications that do support pressure sensitivity. For example, we've got Alias Sketchbook Pro demo here. So here we are in Sketchbook. I'm not exactly at the right angle to do a real pretty drawing right here, but we're going to just trace some circles with fairly good speed. I'm just doing a smooth enough job, about as smooth as I actually can draw circles. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of hideous vectoring going on here. It does support pressure sensitivity, and I'll make a line right here across the screen. I'm going to start out pressing very lightly, and then I'm going to press heavily. See how it gets darker and thicker, and then I'm going to go back to doing it light. So good pressure sensitivity support there. So that's Alias Sketchbook Pro for those of you who use that. And now we're in ArtRage Pro, which is bundled. Normally it costs $60, and you know, ArtRage Pro is actually a pretty nice drawing and painting application. I'm used to Corel Painter 12, and I found this fairly enjoyable and pretty easy to use. You've got all your tools down here. You can choose different brushes. You've got palette knives, markers, all sorts of things. So we're just going to see how it tracks. Right now we're using an oil brush. Let's go switch to a flat brush and change our color a little bit and do that. Some pretty nice stroking there when you've got some of the fatter brushes going. If you've got this little brush here, I've got that set really small right now, then you can see not the smoothest looking tracking right there, not as pretty as we would like. But then I'm using the tool where normally they don't expect you to go for something that small. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Still a little bit there. Now with our palette knife style schmear. And in terms of speed, it gets a little slow if you start going wildly fast. Now when I draw, I don't do that except when I'm drawing some human hair, but going that fast and going about the speed to stroke for human hair like that, you can see it sometimes doesn't manage to keep up. So that's one little drawback for ArtRage Pro. But if you're not going really, really fast, it works pretty well. Anyway, pressure sensitivity works pretty nice. Program is free included. So now we've seen the desktop, we've seen the pen. You also get the brand new Windows 8 experience here, the modern UI with live tiles, all the same stuff that we've showed you in some of our other Windows 8 reviews. So we won't go into it in great detail here, but attractive stuff that you get. For example, there's the news application that comes with it. Beautiful to look at. Easy to use, magazine-like presentation. Kind of makes reading and learning about what's going on that much more enjoyable. To get home at any point, you can either hit this home button here, which is there, so when you're using in tablet mode, you can hit it, or you can just hit the home Windows key there to get home as well. To bring up the charms with basic settings, you swipe in like that. To do multitasking, you can either go to the last thing you've used, which is right now the magazine we were just looking at. If you bring it back, it'll show you everything that we have running right now, and you can switch between those things. Some standard Windows 8 features. You get contacts, you get calendar, you get integration with MS Exchange, and all that stuff's built in. Gmail supported beautifully. The application store for these live tile applications, and of course again you can use straight Windows 7 apps. And we have our multimedia apps, music video players, integrates with Xbox, music and video services as well. Camera application, front and rear 2.4 megapixel cameras. Sony makes pretty nice cameras, so certainly good for some high quality Skype chat on video. Here we've got the built-in Modern UI video player. And we're going to test out a trailer on this lovely 1080p display. That way you'll be able to hear the speakers too.
My dear Frodo, you asked me once if I had told you everything there was to know about my
So volume is at
adventures.
72% right now, not
Well,
bad.
I can honestly say I have told you
Certainly
the
not going to
truth.
get booming bass out of this, but perfectly adequate to actually hear it. And beautiful looking display, really nice for watching 1080p video and full 1080p screen.
I can't just go.
And you can use HDMI out or VGA out as well, but very nice experience thanks to the display. Text likewise is very sharp. Text is sharp as you can get right now at full 1080p. There's nothing that has a higher internal panel resolution for a machine that ships out of the box with Windows. We're not talking about Retina Max here. Certainly for anything with a touch screen. And we're in IE10 in the Metro, or Modern UI as it's now called, interface, which runs at full screen. Good support for pinch zooming, very, very sharp text, nice looking, responsive. Adobe Flash Player, yes, both in the live tile version of IE and the desktop version, and that means if you don't want to have something running full screen, you've got IE running right here in your typical way that you're used to using it. And you can put Chrome on here, you can put Firefox on here, you can do anything that you could with your Windows 7 PC as well. So how about the keyboard? Obviously this is an 11.6-inch device. That means you're going to have a netbook-sized keyboard on here. For those of you who make your living writing or spend all your day writing for whatever reason, you're probably going to want a bigger keyboard here, especially because you've got about 3.5 inches of space over here because the slider mechanism is taking up some of that. Why does the slider mechanism do that? Not just to prop the display up at the correct angle, but because there's mechanisms behind here that support the slider, and there's some internals that it makes room for, internals for the computer, that is. Anyway, as small keyboards go, very nice job. Plenty of key travel on here. Nice tactile feel. Good backlighting on this. Pretty easy to see in the dark, and again is adjustable. You can have it use ambient light sensor. You can set duration of backlight, all that sort of thing. But still, we're talking fairly small keys here. So if you've got giant fat fingers and you type a lot, probably not going to be your favorite solution right here. But for those of us who do a moderate amount of typing, want the touchscreen, want the digitizer, need a keyboard with us enough of the time that we don't want to have to be carrying around accessory keyboards. It's nice to have it all built in together, always convenient, and this also acts as a stand. So that's why slider designs exist. If you look right here, you see there's no room for a trackpad, obviously. Rather than make the keyboard even smaller, and they've kept it at a reasonably good size here height-wise, we have, it looks like one of the ThinkPad style eraser stick pointers. It's actually an optical sensor. And it works reasonably well. It's a little bit of a weird concept, but it's like the world's smallest trackpad. If you think of it that way, it makes more sense. And you've got your clicker buttons down here, or you can tap, do a double tap on that, but sometimes your finger tends to wander around more. I find I don't care about this too much because I have a touchscreen, so very rarely do I ever resort to anything other than using the touchscreen to work with the product anyway. In terms of key relief, you can see really a pretty good amount of key relief for something that's this skinny. The keys are in the normal places. The only thing that would be a little less than thrilling is the fact that the right shift key is not oversized. You got your page up, page down cluster over here, oversized enter key, oversized backspace key, your FN row here, Does double duty to control multimedia brightness, that sort of thing, typical. So again, not a machine for writers primarily. Obviously, it's really for those of you who want the portability, the touchscreen, the active digitizer. But that said, I obviously do a lot of writing, don't I? I write reviews for Mobile Tech Review, and I had no problems typing on this keyboard. Now I have large hands, but skinny fingers, as you can see. So that works out just fine. I do have to take a little more care to make sure I stay homed in on the keys, though, because the layout is a little bit more compressed than it would be, say, on a 13-inch notebook, obviously. The machine has dual-band Intel Wi-Fi 802.11bgn. Dual-band is nice to have, and it also supports Intel Wi-Fi wireless display for those of you who really despise those HDMI cables. It has Bluetooth 4.0, high-speed, NFC, and again, those dual 2.4 megapixel cameras front and rear. So all in all, you get a lot of machine for your money. If you're looking for a very portable but versatile kind of touchscreen computer here with the active digitizer, with the keyboard that's always with you, but not too bulky design, doesn't come in separate parts for those of you who are not really into the transformer kind of design because you figure you're going to be wanting the keyboard frequently. You want something smaller than the Yoga or the ThinkPad Edge. There's a lot going on here with the full wireless features, the full HD display, backlit keyboard, ambient light sensor, full wireless on board. Really a pretty nice machine for the money, and a good configuration to start with 6 gigs of RAM, or even go up get 8 gigs of RAM if you want to do that. So that's the Sony VAIO Duo 11, available now, though apparently in short stock, because a lot of people are buying this. And honestly, it's a good value for the money, something we didn't used to be able to say about Sony. If you're looking for a full Windows 8 tablet, not RT, so you have the full Windows 7 desktop experience going on here, it offers a lot of bang for the buck, actually. And for those of you particularly who need that digital pen for the active digitizer, for artwork, for taking notes, for marking up documents, good stuff. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.